Okay, do you think you get your speed from the track? You're not unlike many runners who get into running and start to implement a track session. Maybe you're doing it once a week, maybe you're doing it Tuesday and Thursday night, exactly as I was as a kid growing up in athletics. It's the natural thing to do in the UK club system. But when I figured out what I'm about to tell you in this video, not only did my running improve across 5K, 10K, half marathon, and definitely marathon, I became a better all-round runner because I understood fundamentally where my pace was coming from, and so where to implement speed training and where to do it to get the maximum benefits from it. And when I got back into running in 2010, I put into practice all the things that I'd learned as a kid. So I'd be hitting the track once a week, and I feel like I was super springy on the track. I was able to measure very easily a 400 meter or an 800 meter or a mile repeat. It all made sense. But when I figured out this part, I got way quicker, and I went from running 4 hours 25 for the marathon to running 2 hours 21 for the marathon. Now, it's important to start this video with removing that myth, removing that belief that we get our speed from the track. It's just not true. And I'll remove that myth within this video, but we get our speed from running fast. And we maybe also get our speed, some of us, if we're competitive, of running with other faster runners that happen to be at a track session. And as I said, as a kid, I grew up Tuesday and Thursday night in the summer was track session. And that would typically be 800 meter reps, 400 meter reps, and repetitions where you'd run with much faster runners, but also people who were training for longer distances. And so you'd want to keep up with the front of the group, and that may help you initially. In actual fact, what's happening in that session is probably some people are working too hard. Definitely some people putting too little effort in. And for some people, very few, it's just the right effort, but it's enjoyable. So why is running on the track bad for you, or why can it be bad for you, and what is a better solution? First of all, the track is a more forgiving surface. It's got more give to it, especially a new track, and you may associate that with you bouncing around and feeling fast and springy like you would in super shoes or a fast shoe with lots of foam. In actual fact, you're using, especially your lower leg muscles, but all your leg muscles, you're using them in a different way. Because if you think about it like a trampoline, if you're trying to push off and jump as high as you possibly can on a trampoline, that takes a lot of force from your lower legs. If you think about the extreme, it always makes sense, and that's the extreme. What you're actually doing on the track is you're putting more force into the ground to go faster. And especially if you're running in groups and trying to keep up, you're putting that force in on a regular basis, and it's very, very dissimilar to the surface that you're training for. Unless you're training for the track and track races, then it makes sense to be on the track some of the time. But if you're training for a road race or a trail race, which most of you are, it makes way more sense to be on the surface that you're training for. Point number 2, the bends of a track every 100 meters are probably unlike the goal race that you're training for. So if you're training for 5K, 10K, half marathon or marathon, a lot of straight lines, a lot of gradual turns, maybe some 90-degree turns, maybe some 180-degree turns, but not every 100 meters are you taking a bend where you're using a lot more of the outside of the left leg and pushing off the inside of the right leg. And again, if you think about the extremes, it makes sense. If you think about roller skating, if you've ever done it and you're roller skating anti-clockwise, you're pushing off a lot more, and so you gain a lot more strength the inside of your right leg and the outside of your left leg. And so exactly the same on the track. What we're doing is we're building a track running body, and although again we want to keep up with the group that we're in or the group in front of us, we're going to exert more force, so we've got the surface playing against us along with the bends. Point number 3. Your watch, your GPS is likely to be off on the track. If you're running with it like I do on your left hand, that's the inside of the track, it's likely not to give you that 400 meters. So a lot of people try to run fast and try to run their PBs and run a lot faster on the track because the GPS data is not accurate. What you should be doing instead, if you want to do that on the track, is measuring 400 meters as it actually is, a 400 meter, and it will be measured in most cases absolutely correctly. That often gives runners the false sense of security that they are faster than they actually are. Point number 4 actually has pros and cons. So if you're going to your track night, and that might be every Wednesday night, for me it was every Tuesday and Thursday when I was growing up, which is too much, but you're working together with athletes that are maybe specialists in 400 meters or 800 meters or 1500 meters. Then you're working with athletes who are specializing in the half marathon and marathon. So it's a nice mix to the group, and if that group is 10, 15, 20 people, there's a lot of energy from that group that you can feed upon. And as I said before, if you're the middle of that pack and the pace is perfect for you, that can be a great session, and you can try to hold on to the people in front of you and they can kind of pull you along and you feel like you've got that competitive element of a race. That would not change if you were doing your intervals on the road or if you're doing it on the trail in the group. You'd still have that competitive element. So you need to take a step back in those, and it's very difficult, especially if you have a competitive personality. You need to take a step back and think to yourself, okay, what is best for me? What effort should I be putting in for this session? If it's hard for you to go out and do intervals on your own, what I'd say to that is maybe initially it would be good to train in a group, and it would be good to go to the track if that's your only group that you have access to. Ideally, you'd be doing those on the road if you're training for a road race. But what I'd say to you is what I'd want to implement, especially with the athletes that I coach, is somebody who can go out alone and execute an interval session. Because what that does for you is obviously it builds character, you pushing yourself alone when nobody's watching, but it allows you to pace a session and get used to pacing a session with different length intervals, which nicely feeds into your race, whether you're racing 5K or 10K, half marathon or marathon. It makes you better at pacing and makes you a better all-round athlete. And you've got the mentality boost of you going out, and let's say it's 6 times a kilometer, and at 4 you really want to get in the car and go home, but you know you've got 5th and 6th. That might be easier for you to do if you're alone, but it's character building if you get those done and you push through. Usually it's the penultimate rep that really catches people off, because they feel as if they've got past halfway, they're almost at the finish, but it's in the last rep that they can see the finish line, and then they can execute usually faster, even if they've exhausted themselves way earlier. But it's a case of learning to pace the entire interval and learn, most important, learn to control your energy and effort throughout the interval session. Again, that's going to feed nicely into your racing. Before I come on to the solutions of how you can do exactly the same session that you're currently doing on the track, switch it to a different surface and make it work for you, whether you're training for 5K or a marathon on the road or on the trail. Point number 5 is a positive point about the track. It's absolutely brilliant to be part of a club, and the club system we have in the UK is absolutely fantastic, and it's brilliant in a lot of places in the world. What you then have access to is races on a regular basis, whether that's on the road, cross country, fells or track. It's also going to give you that accountability. So if you're new to running and you know that everybody is showing up to the track on a Tuesday and Thursday night, that makes you want to get there because you don't want to break that chain, which is incredible for hardwiring the effort in the beginning. What it's also going to give you, although it might be a surprise session, and it often was for me, which is another topic of kind of, you go into the track, you go in to do an interval session, but you have no idea what it is. There are pros and cons to that as well, especially if you're thinking long term, but it will give you some structure. It will give you an idea when you look around you at 20 to 30 other people of how hard people are pushing in those intervals, how quickly and how well they're recovering in between the intervals to go again. So it will give you that structure. It will also give you access to plenty of people, not just in your training group, plenty of other people that you share commonality with, and that is extremely powerful at any stage in your running journey. You might get to a stage where, okay, 6 of you want to go and do New York Marathon, or 10 of you want to go and do London Marathon, and that is not only an exceptional weekend, it's so much better to do it as a part of a group. So what are the solutions? The solutions are very simple. Think about the goal. What are you training towards? If that's a trail marathon or a trail race or a trail ultra marathon, and you're going to be running on a smooth, buttery, very runnable trail, that's where I would be doing my intervals. And so if that's 8 times 800 meters, that's what I'd be doing. And the rep length may vary, but again, you've got to gradually build up to a total volume of running faster. But have that specifically on the surface that you're going to be racing on. Very, very important, and it's an often overlooked area of people's running game. Exactly the same if you're training for a 5K or a marathon, and you know that's going to be on tarmac, maybe some of it's on concrete, on the road. Get used to that surface so that your stride length is exactly the same. Your cadence is exactly the same. You're getting used to running at marathon pace or at faster than marathon pace on exactly the surface that you're going to be racing on. And then, exactly the same with nutrition. There are no surprises on race day. You're used to it. It's just like any other training session, any other long run, any other interval session. All the specific work is done on the surface that you're going to be racing on. I hope you enjoyed that. But tell me, do you currently do your intervals on the track? And are you aware of those issues with the track and how it doesn't feed into your goal? And would you be changing it after watching this video? Let me know in the comments below.